Warm welcome to all the participants, and I wish you a very good evening. I welcome all of you to these uh, webinars on internal audit as we are arranging with a special focus on industry specific internal audit. And this is the series that we are planning, and this is the first webinar which we are having on internal audit in IT, information technology industry, which is one of the vast industries and important for the economic development. So we have selected all such industries, and one by one we will be coming to you. So friends, internal audit, or for that matter, any company will have its standard functions, like they will have sales and income and then expenditures and assets and liabilities, which we see in the balance sheet. However, the underlying transactions and the process and the significance keep varying. Particular expense in one industry may be insignificant, but for another industry it is quite of a significant. So the way it is managed and controlled makes significance of the internal audit also for that particular industry. So with this objective in mind, the thought process is to make the professionals, internal audit professionals, kind of an industry audit professionals specialists, thereby understanding the peculiarities of each business, so that we are ready to take over on any assignment. So friends, with this brief background, today we have organized internal audit in information technology industry, and to elaborate on that and have an expert word on that, we have Mr. Anirban Banerjee with us, who will be taking us through this journey. A brief introduction about Anirban Anirban is currently heading service delivery excellence in banking, financial services, and insurance segment of Tata Consultancy Services, uh, uh, largest IT company worldwide. Anirban has completed his engineering in computer science, and then he pursued the business management, followed by cost accounting, and he has also done Master of Philosophy in economics. He has overall 18 plus years of experience in business acquisitions, banking operations, and operational risks. So Anirban is a global head of service delivery excellence at TCS Banking, Financial and Services and Insurance Cognitive Business Operations, that is called CBO, and he is directly responsible for delivery excellence and risk management, transition implementations, governance, business vigilance, and fraud management for the BFSI segment, and also risk management implementation for BFSI globally. So he has led various implementation of risk compliance and audit frameworks across verticals of TCS, and coordinated various regulatory audits of these are regulatory audits across the borders, like OCC, MAS, FSA, and RBI regulations from India. His domain expertise are regulatory compliance and internal process audits, specialization in corporate banking, trade security operations. So Anirban is a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, certified professional project management professional, certified ethical hacker, certified information security manager, GRC professional, GRC audit certified GRC auditor, lead auditor in ISO 9001, 22301, 21001 standards. And his specialization is in advanced robotics and digital project management. Anirban has authored various papers in evolving risk management landscape and robotics, along with changing soil chemistry for peninsular India with respect to carbon forfeiture. He has deliberated in various governance, risk, and compliance forums as a key speaker on risk, compliance, and fraud and governance issues. So Anirban is also a council member for GRC in Risk Management Association of India, and a governing council member for Asian Marine Conservation Association. So friends, we really have a very versatile speaker, very subject, very deeply involved subject matter expert, and I am sure that we will have a lot of value addition through his session. With this brief introduction, friends, I welcome Anirban, and I hand over the session to him now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nilesh. Nilesh, I was almost bored out of everything because of such a long introduction, but I'll keep it short. Friends, Nilesh was talking way too much, I guess, but see, I'm a learner and this space, whether you call it audit, risk, compliance, governance, and there are all various dots all scattered across. And as Nilesh specifically focused on, we are part of the BFSI industry, one of the most critical industries globally. All of you are part of, and I'm sure that most of you are proven SMEs and proven subject matter expert in your areas. And of course, all of you are much better auditors and have far greater auditing capabilities. What I'll try to do is I'll just try to share a few anecdotal points with you today, which maybe some of the pebbles have picked up in the brief journey which I had. And I'll of course learn with you, learn through you, and learn from you today, basis your questions, basis the interactions which we have. Also, I would like to share a couple of things with you today. One is that this is not one of a speech or one of a program I want to do and run out of this place. Uh, all the questions, all the queries, clarifications which you'll have post the session, most welcome. I believe that after sales service is very important in today's age, and everything is a commodity, whether it is a risk management practice, whether it is audit, everything is a commodity, and unless we treat it as a commodity and we understand the end consumer's experience and we walk with that experience, we don't do any justice. So with that short note from my side, we'll go a little deeper into various components of this discussion today. And most of you are quite aware of things which I'll talk in the beginning. Please bear with me for a few minutes. Don't feel that no, this guy is going to just brood some of the very boring topics and go away. Not that. I want to set the context right. I want to set the focus right. And thankfully, Nilesh has given us adequate time today to discuss all the components in great detail. So we'll go through it. And as Nilesh very clearly articulated, the whole gamut of internal audit in today's parlance is very critical. Okay, because I was reading very interesting note yesterday. No more the internal auditors are treated like they will do come do some activity and go away. They are now part of the game, and their skin is as much in the game as the business guy or the guy who is delivering the services to the customer, because the customer wants an impeccable service, whether it's in information technology, whether it is information technology in the banking and financial services industry, whether it is information technology in life care, whether it is information technology in any other space. But I spoke about BFSI and life care because here the margin of errors are really very low, and we need to be really aware of the fact. So I'll start with a particular slide for all of us to ponder for a couple of minutes. This is a study or a study report which the Internet Society published for the year 2018-2019. They said the impact of potential audit failures. Please bear with this word, potential audit failures in the cybersecurity space. So what does it effectively mean? That there were certain audits which happened, there were certain procedures to perform audit, or there were certain practices to conduct an audit. After that, still all these things have happened. What has happened? There are 95% breaches which could have been prevented. Effectively, if I had to look at it in a very layman perspective, only 5 breach was audit safe. That means the 5 breaches auditors couldn't have predicted. there was absolutely 3.2% decrease in the reporting of breach incidents. That itself is a big trigger. If there are more breach incidents, I'm more happy because again, I would take a little bit of flack. I'm old school. I'm happy to report incidents rather than conceal the incidents. Okay. There were 5 billion records which were exposed. Now, this is way too much, and the way things are, and we will look at it why I'm saying way too much. If you look at the overall, gamut of things, there was a 12% rise in the targeted ransomware activities. There was a $12.5 billion loss, which is predicted since 2013. This is an FBI number, so it's typical North America geography. I was reading something which again some KPMG report of 2018 was saying that the accumulated loss is in the region of $50 billion. So effectively, the internal audit function has huge responsibility. With that comment, let me touch a bit on the whole function, right? Ultimately, what is internal audit and why we talk so much about internal audit and how it is different from anything else? Internal audit is typically a department or the organization where people are tasked to perform the unbiased work. Okay, here people are supposed to bring in the independent reviews of the business organization and processes. Here they are providing inputs to the senior leaders, to the governing bodies of the organization, both on the organization's risk, the control environment, operational effectiveness, and the compliance capability to all the applicable legislations, jurisdictions, and regulations. So a very, very complex and comprehensive unit is an internal audit unit. So this is something which we must always remember. This unit actually reports to, in every organization, however they are structured, they report directly to the board or they report directly to an absolute independent senior leadership through the audit committee. An audit committee bestows a lot of power. With great power comes great responsibility, and I feel I always borrow the Spider-Man phrase that internal auditors are equivalent to Spider-Mans in their own way. So we need to really, really be aware of that fact. And the whole objective is to identify those weaknesses which we can prevent and which we can quickly fix before anybody else comes and tells an organization. How does it differ, or how does it really pan out differently from an internal versus true external audit? In an internal audit, typically, it's the employees of the organization. Now, you will definitely question how employees of the organization can be completely independent. Yes, that is where internal auditors have to really wear a very, very strong, unbiased hat and maybe a helmet, if you want to use the word. External auditors are typically all those CPA firms or audit firms whom we are aware of. The whole idea of an internal auditor is they are actually the independent radio for, and I use this word radio with a lot of conviction because radio is much more powerful in terms of communication rather than any other communication mode, because they just go and blare out a particular brand of music which may not be soothing at times, but which is noise to the right stakeholders, and which we really need to be careful about. And internal auditors need to really differentiate this pitch, how they look at it. So the internal audit's focus remains on governance, risk management, and process improvement. I'm not going to go too much into it, but there are types of internal audits, right? We all are aware. There are compliance audits, which typically focuses on the applicable regulations, policies, procedures, and there are so many items, right? FCPA, GDPR, and which actually causes so much of risk to stakeholders. There are environmental audits which really focuses on the company's operations or the environment, and they also assess the company's compliance and environmental laws and regulation. The next piece is the information technology audits. This group actually evaluates information systems, the underlying infrastructure to ensure the accuracy of the processing, the security and the confidential customer information or intellectual property. Now we'll break it down in great detail today during our discussion, but they will typically include the assessment of general IT controls related to logical access, change management, system operations, and backup and recovery. We'll go through in great detail each and every component, but internal audit from an information technology standpoint holds a very, very important space in every organization because they are very, very different from all the other mentioned audits. Operational audits are basically, they just assess how the control mechanism and how is the overall efficiency and reliability of the control mechanism. And performance audits are typically to have a check on the goals and objectives being met. Now, typical every audit, whether it's an information technology audit or a audit of any other nature, the audit process actually does not change too much. There's a planning phase where you scope, where you actually draw the rules of the game. You perform a detailed field work where you actually go ahead and perform the field work in terms of actual act of auditing, where you set out your stakeholders, you go question them, you interview them, you understand the process, you feel a whole host of data along with you, try and understand those data. Then comes the most important piece of this whole audit exercise is to bring out an independent, unbiased report where you will actually come up with clearly articulating the issues. You'll encourage the audience to read and give you feedback, and also ensure that the findings are accurate and it is going to the right stakeholders. Ultimately, the auditors should not end at the reporting stage. They should continuously follow up for all the items which have been identified and take them to closure. That means they will not fix it, but they will continue to bring it to the right stakeholders oversight. For various reasons, most internal auditors do report to the board. So they will also bring in board's oversight to this whole process. Now, typically an internal audit and external audit, the fight always remains and always becomes a very glaring fight. So IT audits, no difference. In an external audit, the stakeholders are charged. Stakeholders clearly come with a particular written document. They come with a particular bill. They go with that after invoicing. But internal auditors, since they are homegrown people, sometimes we try to take advantage of them. We keep on adding some scope during the course of audit, or if we keep on saying, can you please focus on this area also? Sometimes internal auditors have a tendency to avoid certain critical stakeholders. They usually avoid the customers, they avoid the third-party stakeholders. They do not talk to everybody. So it becomes people in the trenches, which becomes a little difficult to address. The not reviewing the data is one very glaring part of it, and we'll talk about it, how this has impacted. If you are looking at an internal auditor, and if you sit with the DBA or the data provider to understand how data is being generated, and if you're not doing that, you're actually going to do a great injustice. See, the ultimate focus of a should always be looking at the complete population, complete database. They should not be doing a sampling. That's my view. Sometimes the objectivity and independence get lost for some of the areas, but not always. So I'm not going to attribute this too much. But these are the common reasons why most of the internal audit fail, including the ones which are there in typical in IT industry. Now, we just wanted to focus on this for a moment, that what is the difference between a business audit and an IT audit? Business audit, you typically evaluate the processes, evaluate the programs. In a IT audit, you actually look at the entire structure, the focus of the organization, the overall infrastructure, how the IT processes, IT procedures that supports the respective business functions are written. Also, both these audits provide considerable value to the organization, and they provide absolute independent assurance. So therefore, IT audits may have to be repeated far often than the business audits, because business audits, once you put a process in place, once you jacket it, and once you keep on testing it through your business outcomes, you can be happy. But from an IT landscape perspective, this landscape continuously changes, so as the control practices, which needs to be always elevated. So that needs to be kept in mind. Now we get into really core information technology audit types, and we'll focus a great deal on each and every audit. So there's something called a general controls review, right? And this is like a very vast space. This is an annual internal audit of a computer controls impacting application systems of the university, and I always use this word university in all my parameters, is that you are actually looking at the entire universe. You're not looking at an organization in silo. What happens is some of the times, most of the folks go look at a particular absolute silo of an organization. Okay, they say we have looked at this element and this part of infrastructure services. No, information technology auditors cannot say. Information technology auditors always have to look at overall application systems of the universe, and it has to be like a report card of the IT control environment, because here you will have to actually give every single parameter, which is a standard parameter for your control. You should define them, and you should continuously monitor and give it as a report card. The typical general controls review will actually cover the data security, the physical security, all the program changes, every single change management in IT infrastructure of the organization, those changes, and contingency planning, because this contingency planning is very important, and we'll talk about it in great detail. IT contingency planning or information technology contingency planning is little different from the normal business contingency planning or planning which we do. So most of this, external auditors, also come and do this review. But when you do an internal auditor, as an internal auditor, when you do a general controls review, you actually need to do it in a really efficient and cost-effective way. Otherwise, this does not help the overall entity, whether you call it a universe or you call it a small application or a small organization or small part of the organization. Application controls review. These are reviews at a specific computer application or a system. Typically, one program, one platform, one application which you have designed. They will just come, perform check, look at the processing controls, look at the accuracy levels, efficiencies, and integrity. Look at the output controls. So it is typically, if you look at the entire golden cyborg model, in application controls review, they actually come and do a golden cyborg. What is there in the system, what is coming as an input, what is being processed, what is coming as an output. They just do a review of that. So this is very localized audits. We should very clearly call them out that these are clearly localized audits. Now, the next bit is always my, I just love this particular assessment, because this is the software development lifecycle reviews. Any SDLC program which you have, okay, it should actually resemble the exact project which is getting delivered. If you are building a particular prototype or you're building a particular system, your SDLC review should exactly follow that model. You should exactly create a prototype how your entire software development was planned. You should do your reviews exactly in that format. If you're not doing it, what will happen is you will perform a so-called SDLC review, which will not give you all the issues, whether it is an issues related to the application, whether it is related to the larger infrastructure, whether it is related to the the capability or the applicability of that function. And here, whenever the SDLC reviews are undertaken, please ensure that you actually look at the bug fixing process, or the total number of bugs which are identified, how the bug fixing has happened. Today, the IT world has embraced the next space, which is continuous controls monitoring. The continuous controls monitoring is very important stuff, because every day, whatever controls you have defined, all the controls should be monitored periodically, and it does not require to come and do it. You can define your processes, you can define your programs. Only the exceptions should go to the audit, and auditors should focus only on the exceptions. The next two bits are very interesting audits from a typical IT environment. The first one is, of course, the telecommunications billing reviews. Now, telecommunications billing review is not only the so-called telecommunication review, it is the overall cost of infrastructure which needs to be revalidated and independently evaluated. Is there a way we could have rationalized your entire infrastructure cost? And you help the organization when you actually perform a telecommunications billing review. I don't know how many of you are doing that, but if you're not doing it as part of your IT audits, please add them for your organizations. The last piece is very important: the systems penetration analysis and information security reviews, which will anyway take it up for various devices and various instruments and applications. We will dwell a little more in penetration testing a little more at the later part of the review. So with this, we come to a very important area: the disaster recovery and business continuity auditing. The disaster recovery and business continuity auditing are two different components. The first component is, if there is a disaster, how the recovery plans are created. Okay, are they linked, or are the IT plan and the non-IT plan cohesive enough to support each other? And is there a business continuity process in place which can again sustainably support the disaster recovery process or not? The auditors need to focus on these two elements independently and assess, like, if it's a real disaster situation. Say, for example, we all know what happened in Chennai 5 years back, right? And there are a lot of predictions it will happen again. Have you actually done a simulation if Chennai goes out, or Chennai experiences a huge monsoon this year? What will happen? So that is the kind of simulation which an auditor also needs to do, and then perform the tests. Otherwise, the audit will not throw up the right results. And of course, the functional areas of expertise are there in various, various parts of the audit function, which we focus on. So let's break it down. Let's go a little more granular. How do IT audits add value to your organization, right? The first thing is that there is a matured cybersecurity practices which gets created. If you look at the NIST's cybersecurity framework, it's a race-based tool which is typically helps in the resiliency of physical and the virtual systems and assets against attacks. What does it basically mean is that all the cybersecurity programs or of your organization, is it actually at least NIST level 1, level 1, if I'm not talking about the NIST's matured models. Otherwise, you are definitely not resilient enough to face any issues. And this framework actually gives a very good alignment to all the cybersecurity activities and business mission requirements. It also tells you how is your risk appetite and the risk tolerance. And this is really helpful to check the maturity level of the cybersecurity related processes, because it ultimately helps strengthening and implementing controls of the function itself. So if you look at this particular comment, that maturing cybersecurity processes and why auditors should focus on this, the first slide which we saw today was a focus area for us, right? That most of the organizations in 1 year have lost so much, right? And there were 95% of the cybersecurity incidents could have been avoided had auditors focused on this area. And my submission to each and every auditor, fellow auditor on this call is that spend a few hours to train yourself on the various modalities of cybersecurity. Don't read this word as a very high-end item and avoid it when you come and perform any information technology audits. So the next bit is that improving system recovery time after a major disruption, right? This is the most talked subject for every business continuity manager or a disaster recovery officer, right? That if you undergo a particular incident, or if you are subjected to a natural disaster or a man-made natural disaster, how much time will you take to get back? And as an IT auditor, okay, actually are you assessing and are you really reviewing the disruption recovery capability of your organization? Because when you are actually doing a disruption recovery capability, you have to keep two things in mind. One, the disaster recovery of the physical practices or the physical contours. That means all your data centers and everything has to come up. Second, all your connections or all your networks and everything has to be back on their feet to connect with the last mile. Otherwise, it will be a failure to perform a disruption management. And this is where the auditors really have to dig deep, simulate better, and perform a dipstick analysis. And this is where auditors should also focus on data. How many times did you have outages? What were the nature of the outages? Was the outages silo in nature, or the outages actually resulted in multiple connected events which had a further cascading of risk events, which in a normal typical environment a business guy would have definitely overlooked? Because a business guy, as long as his business process is up or his team is up to deliver software development, he will not bother much. But did you really actually check that the network utilization way beyond the normal limits, and whether there were not that many connections which could be offered as a recovery from an alternate site perspective? All those components are not something which a business guy will typically focus on if he's back on his feet. But this is where an IT auditor has to really look at what are the components where this could have gone wrong. Then the next focus area, right? The risk of inappropriate user access to systems. This is a very important aspect, and I'm sure with today IIM and IM, all those practices which are in place, and we'll talk about it. Your focus area will always be to look at the identity access management related events, look at how your SIEM functions. But the most important thing is that as an auditor, how are you validating that there are no unauthorized accesses which has happened? Were all the unauthorized accesses detected? If there was a detection process, if there is an alert monitoring process, how many false alerts were ignored, or all false alerts were actually validated or invalidated, whichever way you and your organization have defined? Is there a credential loss management program, and did your organization go through a detailed credential loss management? Because this entire review will add value to organizations by reducing the likelihood of any unauthorized individuals performing malicious activity in a system. I'm reading this particular sentence for a particular reason. This is the most lowest hanging fruit, or the lowest incumbent of a ransomware detected, or ransomwares which have happened in the globe, across the globe as of now. The organizations give lot of cadence towards reducing the likelihood of unauthorized individual performing malicious activity in a system. That effectively means there were attempts, there were individuals, there were organizations, now it has become sovereign also in nature. people have attempted. The weaker organizations or the frail organizations did not monitor this space more effectively and more carefully. That is what has caused the inappropriate accesses. And all the glaring events have started from those first inappropriate access to their systems. There's so much of talk happening as we are speaking. In fact, this week itself, we have like 7 or 8 companies, right, or 7 or 8 platforms, including some of the startups, who have lost a lot of data, right, due to some data thefts which have happened. I don't want to name anybody because I'm not sure all of you represent which all organizations, but I'm sure most of you know that recently held that great cricket festival which we have. One of the large sponsoring companies lost about 2 crore account information, right? All of us know that example. And the root causes, the preliminary investigations do point that they did not perform sufficient assessments on access to or inappropriate access to their systems, which is a great deal of worry. And all this awareness, if you look at the various threats or various types of threats which are today looming on us, are direct or indirect threat to the organization, internal and external IT-related organizational risks, organizational impact of IT-related negative event occurrences, likelihood that harm would occur if vulnerability is exploited. So let's take first example, direct or indirect threat to the organization. If there is an IT audit which is not done properly, or an information technology audit which is not done inadequately, it is definitely a direct threat, because more often than not, regulators have a very great deal of affinity towards this space. They will come and hold you responsible. Even if the regulators, you're lucky, your regulators are not questioning, there could be a loss to a customer data and it will have a large impact. If you look at the organizational risk from another standpoint, that your IT could not even come up or resurrect them during a disruption. The third is the event monitoring space. How organized as your organization from a event monitoring? I'm not even talking about risk event monitoring. I'm saying negative event monitoring. And how much cadence does your internal auditor gives from an information technology audit of all negative occurrences? Because the list of all negative occurrences should be the first point of assessment for the auditors. They need to actually see if there is a trend which is coming up. We will see how DA space is evolving, the data analytics space is evolving. We'll focus great deal on that, but this is the most important area. And of course, the vulnerability we spoke about. So this is something which all of you should focus when you go back and practice internal audits from an IT standpoint in your organization, and of course the risks which you want to tell to your stakeholders. I just put up this slide because there's a lot of commonly asked questions, right? That what are the various regulations which govern IT audit landscape, right? IT audit landscape has various regulations. If you look at India, you will say the IT Act also has, IT Act 2013 has a reference to it, but not in great detail. But it has a reference. But if you look at the global landscape, and especially the North American geography, the first is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which came up way ago in 1984, and it was again refurbished in 94. It actually gives more cadence towards the protection of network. The second was the Computer Security Act, which actually gave the right for the security organizations to establish certain very strong practices around sensitivity of data. The next piece is the privacy legislation and the Federal Government Privacy Act. This is a very old act of 1974. It has been refurbished a couple of times. There's a new act which is come in now, which is a state act, but which is also being considered as a federal act in US. that is called California State Privacy Act, or CCPA, which is being considered to be replacing the federal government Privacy Act right now. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act. This is ECPA is an old CCPA, but ECPA has its own nuances, which CCPA does not have at this point of time. Just like the most common usage of ECPA was seen on 3rd and 4th of November, right? When some of the states did not give cadence to the previous president in terms of his complaints. The Communications Decency Act. This is more to do with the decent activity and indecent activity, and it really provides that demarcation. And of course, the HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. HIPAA is presently undergoing a great change, and HIPAA did not go through the necessary change in the past regime because Obamacare got stalled. Maybe the new regime will take up. Now, all this have very strong and direct impact on your IT audit landscape for your organization if you are exposed to North America in any manner, or if you are a player in North American geography, you need to have great cadence towards all this when performing information technology acts and the information technology audits. So now I thought it is very important for all of us to know what are the emerging trends, right? Because as an auditor, we must focus and we must have great, visibility to all the new trends which is coming up. See, the most important trend is that holistic understanding of the changes which is going through the industry. The information technology environment is changing. The whole practices are changing from initiating, processing, recording transactions. It's no more human being which is processing a transaction. Mostly all the organizations, all the IT organizations are, of course, offering this to their customers, and banking organizations, even healthcare organizations are going for chatbots and other things where it's machine who first has the right to refuse a particular activity, and then human beings come in. So the auditors must know how to look at machines processing requirement, how a machine deals with delivering certain services, how it is different from a human interface. After a machine delivers a work, is there a human element to it? If there is a human element for the non-STP components, how is that handoff happening? How is the non-STP piece managed? Is there an adequate safeguard from an information technology standpoint from an STP data versus non-STP data? So that's a very, very important change which is going through. The second is that the risks which are resulting from implementation of new technologies. As we are seeing that legacy systems are going away every day, every organization is coming up with a new technology, right? And today this has become the talk of the town, right? If you are using an iPhone 7, you're considered an old school. So similarly, all this new technologies are evolving. So auditors need to look at new technologies. You cannot say that I only know old technology methods and I will review processes from an old technology standpoint. It will not work. The next piece is that you need to look at specialized skills. Okay, there are various facets. Like new technologies are bringing new facets. Every new technology or a new technology firm, and there are so many mushrooming small-term technology startups which are coming up with various, various models and prototypes for very large organizations are also getting a lot of affinity towards them. But you need to know the legality, you need to know the legislations as an auditor to perform a detailed, very clear auditing stuff. So that's where I thought it will be prudent on my part to give you some small snippet around what are the steps as an auditor we should do or we should keep in mind when there is a changing technology environment. We should actually obtain the understanding and impact of technology on companies' business. its systems of internal control, and its financial reporting. We'll talk about why financial reporting is also required and some important reminders. First is that we should have sufficient professional skepticism. Okay, whenever we are looking at anything, we should have that professional skepticism. Uh, do appropriate risk assessment for new systems, because everybody says that new system has replaced the old system. It has eradicated or taken away all the risks which are associated with an old system. It is not true. Most of the new systems are more vulnerable. More open source codes are coming. Now there is a big fight here. Okay, open source code versus closed code dilemma. But I still feel that as an BFSI auditor, I feel that open source code is not very conducive for BFSI and health and life science related organizations, because we've not become so matured as human beings, because we are still evolving. We have not evolved to be a appropriate human being as yet. So we have the tendency to manipulate with the system. The next is they understand the direct and indirect effects of new technology and determine how its use by entire entity impacts the auditor's overall risk assessment. Because what happens is, say for example, there's a new technology which has come in, we'll say this is the best one. Now, as an auditor, if we are not aware how this new technology works, risk assessment will be pretty shallow. Understand how the technologies impact the flow of transaction, the downstream and the upstream impact of every transaction. Okay, when there is a change in technology, needs to be reassessed for the completeness, for in-scope ICFR systems, and design a sufficient and appropriate audit response. Basically, here the whole impact is, as an auditor, you should first see whether this is sustainable and sufficient in itself or not. If it is not, you should question the efficacy of this new technology being brought, and assess the appropriateness of management's processes to select, develop, operate, and maintain controls related to organization's technology based on the extent of the technology which is used. Now, the fact is very clear that we need to really assess the appropriateness with which the management has gone ahead and is selecting and developing new technologies. So these are very key steps which we need to keep in mind as a IT auditor, because most of the other auditors will not fail because of this, but IT auditors will definitely fail. I thought it is prudent on my part to share some of the key risk factors or the key risk areas which are coming up in this whole space. The commonly identified risks, and these are last 10 years commonly identified risks as per PwC's 2019 report. Okay, so I have not created something on my own. I've told you the source also. Most of the spaces I'm telling you the source of the data, so that you can further deep dive and do your research, so that you can also look at more information. Now, reliance on systems or programs that are inaccurately processing inaccurate data, or both. So this is very important technology risk which we need to keep in mind, because what happens is, if a system or the program is going rogue, okay, and we are not able to identify. Earlier, I commend my uncle for this comment. He used to always say, he was a banker for 35 years. He used to say, if I issue a checkbook, only one customer will be impacted. Now you guys issue checkbooks. We printed some 100,000 odd checkbooks they printed, and they were all with an incorrect CDS code, the new code, right? And they had to reorder that whole system. But the fact is, the person who was first doing that prototype check should have done a proper assessment, proper audit of that item, so that the incorrect program should not have been launched while printing all the 100,000 checks. That's what I keep on telling him, that your auditor was very weak. Unauthorized access to data that might result in destruction of data or improper changes to the data, both, including the recording of unauthorized non-existent transactions or inaccurate recording of transactions. Now, this is very, very important because if you see today, the organizations are moving to continuous control testing mode or continuous control auditing mode. If the recording of the transactions or if the repositioning is not happening very well and the databases are getting corrupt, everything else, the entire downstream outcome will always be wrong. Therefore, before any mega release, before any major release, the upstream impact of data has to be tested very, very effectively and in a very siloed manner so that you have bug fixed for every program which has been written, which has created that code. The possibility of information technology, personal gaining access privileges beyond those necessary to perform their assigned duties, thereby leading to insufficient segregation of duties. Now, this is the most oldest risk known to everybody, that the entitlement should only be on a need to have basis. The moment entitlements are beyond need to have, okay, it has caused a great deal of toxicity in the whole environment. Technology risk is no different. The technology risk, am I audible? I got some alert, some audio issues.
You are audible, Anirban.
Okay, fine. So this is the oldest form of risk which is known to all the auditors, and every auditor or every audit group always likes to give findings or issues related to segregation duties or entitlements. But from a technology standpoint, we need to really understand how the access management work, how the privileges are designed, and how this entire assignment will work. Otherwise, there will always be a toxic entitlement in the environment. There is an unauthorized or erroneous changes to the data in master files. Once you tinker, and this is my common comment I always make in various parlance, that if you actually tarnish your dictionary, okay, or if you corrupt your dictionary, everything else is gone. Okay, so you will write very unpopular words in your emails or in your communication because you have corrupted the dictionary. Similarly, if your data files are or your master files are corrupted from an IT perspective, this is the gravest possible technology risk, and this has impacted about 80 odd large organizations in last 1 decade. So if you go through that PwC report, each one of them, you can figure out how much has been the impact. Unauthorized changes to the systems or programs. We all know what can be the fate of this change. Failure to make necessary or appropriate changes to systems or programs. Inappropriate manual intervention. Potential loss of data or inability to access data is required. Now, this potential loss of data in today's world has gathered a complete different meaning. The IT auditors or the information technology enablement infrastructure services development and deployment people needs to be very careful about, because the companies are distinguishing between information technology, infrastructure services, and the data privacy statement. Any loss of data which is happening, it is going into the third bucket. Third bucket, which is the data privacy stakeholder, they are coming and examining. Once they are coming and examining, they are reporting to multiple regulators and multiple stakeholders, and it is causing a lot of heartburn for the IT auditor, because ultimately IT auditor has assessed and approved that deployment or that data retention process. But if that has gone bad or that has turned sour, it is causing a lot of ugly debate between the data privacy organization and the infrastructure services organization of the world. Risk introduced when using a third-party service provider. Now, all the organizations which are dependent on third-party service provider should have a clear and a robust auditing practice and process, also a governance model on all third-party service provider. Another problem is we typically design all this at a contract stage, and we do not really force them. Okay? 50% of the organizations do a very weak assessment of third-party service provider, and it causes a great deal of damage to the primary organization. Even to the end service or end customer also gets a lot of impact. And the last piece is the new terminology. It is actually culmination of all the above statements. Cyber security risk are applicable to the audit. Now I will just focus on some of the examples of internal audit focus in cyber security world. Okay, and this is very important focus areas. This has been agreed by the Internet Society. This has been agreed by most of the cyber security groups and cyber security councils, that we should perform a top-down risk assessment around companies' cyber security process using industry standards. Here, the moment they have given this wording, around company cyber security process using industry standards as a guide. Now, everybody is very worried, which is that industry standard which applies to us. But as an internal auditor or as the head of internal audit, you should always look at your business process, your service delivery, or your software development, or your area. You could be in a typical brick and mortar industry. What is your end customer requirement? If your end customer requirement requires a greater stringency, please apply that stringent practices or stringent standard. Don't use archaic laws for point number 1. Point number 2, evaluate existing processes and controls such as DLP. This is most commonly talked subject nowadays, data loss prevention solutions, which you have implemented. The IAM itself, the identity access management systems, to help ensure that threats posed by constantly evolving environment are considered. That means you have a very strong DLP in place. You have a very strong IAM process in place to salvage yourself if there is a particularly, God forbidden, you feature yourself in that first category of 95% events. At least if a regulator comes or an external guy comes, you can say, we had deployed the best DLP, we deployed the best IAM solutions, we had actually did a threat monitoring and threat assessment model, but still the environment was much more complex than what we had envisaged. Review the alignment of organization's cyber security framework with regulatory expectations. Every regulator is asking a different cyber security framework or different degree of cyber security need. The new computing, hosting, and storage capabilities. Even the regulators are asking, where will you store information? Assess the implementation of revised technology security models such as multi-layered defense, enhanced detection methods, and encryption of data. Now, this is something where auditors really have to look at when infrastructure services deployment team or infrastructure or information technology deployment team says we have created a multi-layered defense mechanism. You should actually look at what are the layers. Are those layers really effective? They are talking about a physical security and then they're talking about logical security. Those two are not layers. Those are two different types of security, and physical security can never complement of logical security and vice versa. They just act as a deterrent. In a real logical security world, in a real technology security model, have you defined various layers? And how many layers are at which, how many bridges have to happen to impact your data center? This is the question you need to ask as an auditor. What is the penetration testing your various layers have gone through? How many failures were actually retested for or mitigated by your internal people, or it required an external service provider to do a facilitation? These are the questions which you need to ask as an auditor. Otherwise, your teams will not be secured. The next step is the organization's security incident response and communication plan needs to be evaluated like to the last bit. It has to be torn apart, because if there is a security incident response team, how much assessment or how much depth at which they have done a investigation. Second, what was their response and communication plan? Have they closed that incident in a tangible period of time? Were there adequate corrective actions which were deployed to have a repeat incident? Those are the questions which you need to ask as an auditor. Of course, I spoke about this in my previous slide, that assess all third-party service providers in line with organizational policy, procedures, and standards. And today, almost every organization is dependent on a third party. If you are dependent on third party and you're not doing the same level of rigor, or maybe a delta higher level of rigor than yourself for the third party organization, you are actually doing a great disservice as an auditor for your organization. The next piece, my most interesting piece of this whole program today, that what are the emerging trends of data analytics and how DNA is helping the internal auditors. Okay, the continuous evaluation of the rule-based analytics to do more repeatable and sustainable models, and how many times you are actually looking at models, whether they are repeatable and sustainable or not, and then perform the analytics around it. This is most important. Second, that what is the adoption rate of DNA capabilities by the business functions, and are they doing some continuous monitoring, and are they effective enough? That is the most important question. Today you might say, I have a manufacturing unit, I don't want to name the company, one of the world's best manufacturing units in a FMCG space. They have the best manufacturing standards. It's a pure play FMCG product. They have put in a great monitoring process through a robotic process automation. There's a group of external auditors who are part of that engagement to give them one particular certification they were vying for. We looked at their process and we said that your capability to do a continuous monitoring is absolutely ineffective through this robot. This robot will fail if it has to continuously understand and retest a new test criteria every time it captures. So these are the questions as an auditor you'll have to really ask. You have to be inquisitive when you are subjected to this new form of DNA capabilities. The inclusion of quantitative data risk into risk assessment activities to better identify emerging risk and significant changes to known risk. The increased usage of visualization tools and dashboard to improve data discovery and results interpretation to drive deeper insights. And I always feel that as an auditor, also we have great responsibility to change and evolve our audit reports and audit outcomes. They should also have great visualization or visualize outcomes, because today the focus and the attention span of stakeholders are near zero. If earlier management had a 3-minute attention span in the previous decade, this decade they have 1 minute, and as this decade will end, they will come back to near 0-minute attention span. That time, your one image or your one particular dashboard should actually tell the entire story. So the focus areas are assist in creating automated extracts, transform, and load. The ETL processes have to be really very strong, and they should actually look at the repeatable and sustainable analytics. And I'm repeating this word because these are very, very unique interferences and inferences as an auditor. Assess the alignment of strategic goals and objectives of technology companies to risk management practices. Most technology companies today are servicing almost every industry in the horizon. So do they have that right capability to, from a risk management practice standpoint, to deliver to all those, a vast set of stakeholders or not, is something which should be assessed. Perform automated auditing on RC and MRs. See, the root cause analysis and the management responses to every risk, including the business anomalies, are recorded, right? The auditors should go ahead and do a auditing on the RCS and MRs, because that will tell the real truth. If you see 10 RCS of 10 particular risk events, it itself will tell a great deal of story to an auditor even before the auditor goes and looks at the business process. There is a large focus which is coming back. It was always there, but there's a huge focus which is coming back on the data governance. The technology companies, like other businesses, are capturing, transforming, and analyzing internal and external, structured or unstructured, transactional or historical data to change the way they run their businesses. Today, large IT companies, I don't want to name anybody, all of them have started providing cloud enabled or cloud focused services. Okay, and each one of them are saying that we have the best cloud models, but the question, whoever has the best cloud model, gets answered in this one sentence itself. Do they have the capability to capture, transform, and analyze both internal and external information, both structured and unstructured data, both transactional information and historical data? If they are, if a cloud service provider is able to claim this and able to deliver, please go for that cloud services provider. Please help your businesses acquire the right partner there. Now, how the focus areas are changing: assist in the formation of review of data governance policies and procedures, document the data model and points to control to identify security gaps around data collection, storage, usage, and access. This is where the auditors are changing their role. Just being a independent third party lying outside the game, now you are coming inside the game. Your skin is in the game, because you are now going ahead and recommending the business what should be the go-to model. Assist management in creation, review of information management policies that entail designing, organizing, retrieving, and distributing information. Evaluate the company's data classification program and related security deployment controls. This is very important. Every company has a very strong data classification program, and this data classification program gives rise to a security deployment controls. If you are not focusing on the effectiveness of this classification program, the controls or the controls which will be deployed will be very, very weak. Review the effectiveness of the company's ability to respond to new policies and emerging legislative mandates and regulations. This is the first statement I had said, that emerging legislative mandates are also impacting the regulations to a great deal. And this is where we started. I have come here. So if you are doing all this very well, this slide will drastically change. The numbers in this slide will change. And of course, all of us really want to avoid being part of this particular slide. Now, these are my two favorite phrases as an auditor or as a GRC professional. That do you smell what auditor is cooking? Actually, this is what you should tell. Yes, you should smell what auditor is cooking. If you are doing the right thing, and if you are smelling, that means the business understands the importance of audit function. And business will always value you if you say we are from auditing and we are here to help you, rather than we are here to create a turbulence in our life. Most of the auditors come as very intimidating souls, is what I feel. Auditors should come as advisory and friendly souls. They should say that yes, we have issues, we have found events, we have found corrective action plans, but this is the way to fix them, this is the way to solve those particular problems. That is where I say thank you to each one of you. I think Nilesh will have questions for me. I will hand it over to Nilesh for questions. Nilesh, over to you.
Thank you, Anirban. Right now, I am not able to see any question. There was one question, but got answered during your question itself. Menas, you're there? So, first question, Anirban, that we will revert back to the audience that whether the PPT can be shared with them. Of course, we will get back to them.
It can be shared. This is a absolute in personal capacity. This data and this information is, and these are all from publicly sourced information sources. So this data, this PPT can be shared with everybody. This is not a private property or confidential property. The classification of this PPT is public.
Okay. So the next question is from Mr. Gurumurthy Rajagopal. So what he's asking is most of the companies, stroke banks, exploring automated internal audit basis electronic data, and there are some tools are also being developed. The artifacts for the IT internal audits are electronic data. Is there a way to automate this audit completely to reduce the risk of not identifying them manually?
Yes, so Nilesh, you want me to answer now, or you want me to hold for all the questions and answer? Okay.
You can answer, of course.
So it's a good question. The answer to this is very simple. I covered it, but I'll provide a little more details of this. See, today the CATs, which used to be a very catchy phrase in early part of 2010 decade, the computer-aided audit technology and tools used to be a very catchy phrase 10 years back or 5 years back. Now it's no more such a catchy word because every organization, small, big, large, are using CATs in some way or the other. Second, from an information technology or an infrastructure services technology audit standpoint, yes, CATs is very relevant, and almost 100% of auditable components can be automated, subject to the organization's maturity in deploying certain infrastructure services. Number one. Number two, the risk appetite of the organization also depends on the expense or the cost they want to bear on a great CATS platform. Number three, another very important aspect is that how much of data the CATS platform can eat, or can you make it eat, which is internal to your organization without impacting any of your customers or stakeholders or relevant parties. The last bit is there an exception process? The fourth bit is there an exception management process for this data capture, data processing, and data audit, which will happen through the CATS platform? So the answer to the question is yes, it is logically and technically doable, 100% of automation of controls. However, the feasibility is not that great to do 100% automation. That's why you still need human beings. Even if you do 100% automation of all your controls, you will still need human auditors to a bit of extent to understand, appreciate, comprehend, and come out with a communicable report, because a system report will not be very great idea for a board or for the audit committee to make a decision on.
Thank you, Anirban. The next question is from Mr. Anton Renis. He basically needs a guidance on how do we identify the experts for IT audits particularly.
How do we identify?
So basically, how do we choose the good IT audit staff or IT audit firm?
It's $1 million question, okay? And I like the question very much because, see, every audit organization, every audit group, every auditing practice guy, and every auditor is very unique in its own way. From an IT audit perspective, here I don't want to sound like a sales personality, but there are large CPA firms, there are large audit firms who are great IT audit firms, and there are top five firms everybody knows. I don't want to name them. Beyond that, there are certain very specific, focused, specialized ID auditing groups which have emerged. There are certain very interesting startups and fintechs which have emerged in North America, in Europe, in Asia Pacific geography, not in Australia, but the Asia, this Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific geography, who are great information technology audit organizations. There are very highly successful cyber security organizations which have emerged from Israel, I'll avoid that, from Israel, from South Korea, and from North America. So there's a host of stakeholders who are available. These are, I'm talking about organizations. But when you look at a typical IT auditor, okay, or if you are hiring an IT auditor and an IT audit person, what are the typical components which you need to look at from that perspective? One, flair for data. Second, flair for understanding completeness of systems or products or platforms. Third, the inquisitive mind. If you are able to assess these three parameters, and if you find out of these three, two of them are good, one of them is a fair, I think it's a good auditor. So I gave you the organization span and as well as people span. I hope I've answered the question well.
Yeah, thanks, Anirban. Once again, there is a question from Miss Ridhi Nahata. She wants to know about data cleansing and whether the DA can help in this.
Yes, this is a very important element of infrastructure deployment practices or information technology deployment practices. There are appropriate tools available in the market now. The tools are platform agnostic. Tools are application agnostic. There are programs which are available from various companies. I don't want to name again any of them because it will look very bad on my part to name a couple of companies. But all the top data players are providing such platforms and tools. It is freely available, and some of them are available at a pretty nominal cost at a retainership basis. Also, when you are applying or we are actually availing the services, your internal audit function needs to do a very deep and thorough job of assessing and reviewing the data cleansing work which is happening, because ultimately the outcome or this entire piece of data cleansing has a lot of ramifications, and the downstream impact is pretty significant, and it could also create a regulatory risk event. I don't want to go beyond this, so it could create a regulatory risk event. So you'll have to be very careful, because there are very strong, effective data storage and data retention requirements in most of the large nations, and today all organizations touch one or the other such nations while processing or delivering services.
Yeah. So there are two questions of the same nature, Anirban. Basically, the question revolves around the current situation of pandemic. So how the IT internal audit landscape will change, or what are the kind of elevated risks in this situation?
So ENY was the first organization who I'm naming them because they were the first, and then all the other CPA firms also jumped into this. So ENY, it was around the first week of June. They jumped out and they said that they have created the framework and model to perform remote audits for all information technology requirements and information technology needs. They have the necessary platforms, they have the necessary wherewithal to perform end-to-end information technology audits of all large, medium-sized or customers they support, and they're happy to support all the other organizations who need them. Immediately within a week's time or a couple of weeks' time, all the other named known CPA firms also came up with the same models. And today, post-pandemic, we are in close to 9 months of pandemic impact globally. So almost every large organization have changed, evolved, or rewritten their auditing standards, processes, procedures, practices, keeping in mind that remote auditing is going to be the rule of the day. We will have to survive in a remote auditing environment. That is one. So all the internal auditors are also focusing on remote auditing practices. Even the internal auditors across the board are rewriting their practices, rewriting their way to perform audits. They are embracing various tools and technologies. This is a very good space, and I would say this is there are pros and cons for everybody. The audit function are the happiest function in this whole pandemic, because all the risks which they used to show, or they used to threat people with, that this can happen, such dire consequences can happen. Actually, they have demonstrated the world that worst can really come true, and the worst has happened. And so most of the organizations are embracing that change, and it's not an easy change. It's going to take at least 3 to 4 more quarters for consistency to emerge in practices. And I'm happy to say that the ISO organization is also working on a particular standard or particular. They've also started with a working group already, who is working on a remote auditing standard, which will come up very soon. So as ISACA has started working on a model. So every group has started working on remote auditing as the next wave of audit methodology. And this important thing here is the continuous auditing practice, or the continuous control monitoring, which was typically the asks or the best practices which the auditors used to recommend 10 years back, is now being embraced by various large organizations, mid-sized organizations, various critical organizations. And one element which is happening is that auditors are now going to do the post STP audit of all the negative outcomes, or all the risk events which have generated from the computer-aided audit tool. So the internal audit group will focus on all the failures and actually identify the trend and use DNA more effectively. So pandemic is one thing. It's of course very sad, but internal audit functions have started appreciating pandemic a little more. I hope I did not someone feel very bad today.
Right, Anil, there is one last question. What do you think the percentage of IT audit should be forming part of the overall plan in an ITES company, basically IT service company? And of course, you did touch this topic. However, what will be the appropriate percentage, or the quantum, or the extent? So this is a question by Mr. Manish Bhatia.
Very, very important question. And this is, if you recall the slide which I talked about difference between the business audit and IT audit, and I said that IT audits have to be much more consistently, consecutively, periodically performed. And I feel, this is my personal feeling based on various data points, various information in the industry, that at least 50% of all audits should focus on information technology. 50% of all audit energy should go on information technology related controls. If your GITC health is green, if you have a really good GITC standard, the business effectiveness definitely comes in place, because ultimately a businessman wants to sell his product, a businessman wants to use his platform, a businessman wants to deliver services to the customer, wants to ensure that the products are out in the market. All this can happen in this vastly complex and comprehensively challenged post-pandemic world is through a lot of technology usage. As the usage of technology will go up, the need for internal audit to focus on the information technology space is far more higher and far extensive and far I would say comprehensive is the word which comes to my mind more effectively. So if you want to give an objective number, Manish, it should be 50%. At least 50% of your audit focus has to be on IT audits. It can focus on your IT development, it can focus on your IT services, it can focus on your IT recovery capabilities, it can also focus on your typical general controls. And I would suggest that typical general controls you should do every now and then. I don't know whether it is doable to do it every day, but if not every day, but at least every now and then.
Thank you, Anirban, for a very good insight. And really, when it is coming from a person who has handled operations as well as the governance function, it really adds the practical aspect to it. So I thank you very much for accepting our invitation and speaking to the members in the profession. And sure, more and more members will get in touch with you for having a further insight through your. So thank you very much, and I thank the participants. Almost 100 of them attended, and for this value enriching session. And we will have more such sessions coming up. And I request all of you to stay tuned and get more and more insight to different industries to sharpen our skills. I also thank the IIA organizers and administration team for this event without any technical hitch. So thank you very much, and wish you a good evening, stay in good health and spirits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nilesh, and thank you, IIA, for having me here. And I'm sure that we are part of the same ecosystem. So I would continue to hear from you and learn from your experiences as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Anirban.